Sarah shuffled down the narrow aisle of the plane, her arms aching from carrying her restless 2-year-old son, Liam. Her body was screaming for rest after working back-to-back shifts at the diner and the small cleaning job she took on just to afford their tickets. She spotted an empty seat beside a sharply dressed man near the window and didn't care who he was. All she needed was to sit, breathe, and pray Liam didn't cry the whole flight. The man beside her glanced up from his phone as she settled in. His chiseled features, expensive-looking watch, and crisp button-down shirt hinted at wealth, but Sarah barely registered it. She mumbled an apology as Liam squirmed and climbed into her lap. The billionaire didn't say a word, just gave her a quick nod before returning to his screen. The hum of the plane soothed Liam into sleep, and soon, Sarah's heavy eyes shut too. As her head drooped, it landed gently on the man's shoulder. He stiffened at first but didn't move. Minutes passed. Then hours. When Sarah finally woke, her heart skipped a beat. Liam was no longer in her arms, but instead, quietly asleep in the arms of the stranger beside her, who looked at her with an unreadable expression. Sarah panicked. "Where's my baby?" she gasped, her voice hoarse from sleep. The man looked at her calmly and said, "He started to fuss while you were asleep. I didn't want to wake you." She stared at him, unsure whether to feel grateful or terrified. She reached for Liam quickly, but the billionaire handed him over gently, almost reluctantly. "Thanks," she whispered awkwardly, brushing a stray curl from Liam's forehead. "You didn't have to." The man shrugged slightly. "You looked like you needed the rest more than anyone on this plane." His voice was smooth, deep, and polite. Sarah noticed the flight attendants giving him extra attention, addressing him by name, Damon. It stuck in her mind like a song. Damon. For the rest of the flight, silence stretched between them, broken only by Liam's occasional babble. Sarah tried to stay composed, but she could feel Damon glancing at her now and then. When they landed, she stood up, clutching Liam close, expecting never to see the stranger again. But as she turned to leave, Damon said, "Wait. What's your name?" Sarah hesitated, then said quietly, "Sarah." Damon nodded, as if he just stored something important. "Nice to meet you, Sarah," he said. She gave a small smile and walked away, her mind already on the bus fare, the grocery list in her head, and the headache forming from lack of sleep. She didn't expect him to follow. But as she stepped out of the airport doors, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. It was Damon. "Let me drop you off," he said simply. Sarah's jaw dropped. "No, thank you." "That's not necessary," she said, pulling Liam closer. "I insist," he replied. "It's the least I can do. You trusted me with your son while you were asleep. Let me return the gesture." Caught between pride and practicality, Sarah looked at Liam, then the heavy bag on her shoulder, and finally nodded. She got into the car, and for the first time in a long while, felt warm leather beneath her and the hum of silence instead of chaos. Damon didn't ask many questions. He just watched her in the rearview mirror like she was a puzzle. When they arrived at her tiny apartment complex, she thanked him and stepped out. But before she could close the door, he asked, "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" Sarah stared at him like he'd grown two heads. "Dinner?" she repeated, clutching Liam in confusion. "Why?" Damon's eyes didn't waver. "Because you intrigue me." Sarah let out a breathy laugh. "You don't know anything about me." Damon replied, "That's exactly why I'm asking." But Sarah shook her head. "Look. I appreciate the ride, and what you did on the plane, but I'm not, this isn't my world. She shut the door before he could say more, retreating into the stairwell of her building, her cheeks burning. Inside her cramped apartment, Sarah sank onto the worn couch while Liam played with the same 3 toys he always had. She tried to forget about Damon, about his kind smile and strange calm. She reminded herself men like that didn't look twice at women like her. But the next morning, her phone buzzed. A message. Dinner offer still stands. 7 p.m. My driver will wait outside just in case you change your mind. Damon. Sarah dropped the phone. How did he even get her number? She peeked out the window. Sure enough, the same sleek black car was parked outside. Sarah paced her living room, unsure whether to be flattered or terrified. Her thoughts wrestled. What did he want? Was this a game? What if he thought she was easy? But curiosity bubbled in her chest. After hours of doubt, she stood before her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair and fixing her only decent dress, the one she kept for job interviews. By 6:55 p.m., she was outside, holding Liam's hand. Damon's driver opened the door with a smile. "Miss Sarah," he greeted. Her heart pounded as she slid into the car again, this time not out of desperation, but choice. She tried to tell herself it was just dinner. Nothing more. Just a thank you from a polite stranger. The restaurant Damon took her to was like another world. The lights were low, the glasses sparkled, and waiters hovered like shadows. Damon was already seated, wearing a soft gray suit. "You came," he said with a smile that made her insides melt. "I brought Liam," she said nervously. Damon leaned toward the toddler. "That's a good thing," he said softly. And to her surprise, Liam smiled back. Dinner was surreal. Damon ordered things Sarah couldn't even pronounce. He didn't ask about her past or judge her worn-out shoes. Instead, he made her laugh, really laugh, for the first time in years. Liam fell asleep halfway through the meal in a cushioned booth beside them. Damon covered him gently with his jacket. As they ate, Sarah realized Damon wasn't just some arrogant billionaire. He asked questions like he cared, about her dreams, her favorite songs, the first job she ever had. She answered cautiously at first, but eventually, she relaxed. When the dessert came, Sarah found herself smiling for no reason, like a girl on a fairy tale date. On the drive home, Damon was quiet. Just as the car pulled up to her building, he turned to her. "Can I see you again?" he asked. Sarah hesitated, her hand on the door. "Why me?" she whispered. Damon smiled. "Because when you fell asleep on my shoulder, I didn't want to move. And that's never happened before." Sarah barely slept that night. Her thoughts were spinning. The next day at the diner, she overheard 2 coworkers whispering and pointing at their phones. When she peeked over, her heart dropped. There was a photo of her, walking into the restaurant last night, with Damon right behind her. Someone had taken a picture and posted it online. "She's dating him?" one of them gasped. "She must be playing some game." Sarah turned away, cheeks burning. The next few customers stared at her like she didn't belong. Even her manager raised an eyebrow. Sarah wanted to disappear. She tried to call Damon, but stopped herself. What could she even say? Later that evening, a knock came at her door. She opened it and found Damon standing there. "I'm sorry," he said, "I should have thought this through." She shook her head. "They're saying awful things about me." Damon stepped closer. Then let me fix it. Come with me. Let the world see you're not just some rumor. Sarah looked down at Liam, who reached for Damon like he was already part of their story. Just when things seemed like they might finally settle, Sarah received a letter that shook her to the core. It was from her ex-husband, Daniel. He hadn't seen Liam in almost 2 years, hadn't so much as sent a birthday card. But now, out of nowhere, he wanted full custody. The papers claimed she was exposing their child to unfit environments due to her involvement with a man of Damon's status. Sarah crumpled to the floor, Liam playing innocently at her feet. She hadn't even introduced Damon properly to her own emotions, let alone to a courtroom. Her hands trembled as she dialed Damon's number. He's trying to take Liam, she choked out. Damon didn't hesitate. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Damon arrived, he found her crying, gripping the letter with white knuckles. He didn't offer empty promises. Instead, he picked up the letter, read it thoroughly, and looked at her with quiet determination. You're not fighting this alone, he said. Not now. Not ever again. And for the first time in years, Sarah believed she had someone in her corner. The courtroom was nothing like the dramas Sarah had seen on TV. It was colder, quieter, and 10 times more terrifying. Daniel had cleaned up, slicked his hair back, and wore a smug expression that made Sarah's stomach turn. He acted the part of the concerned father while painting her as reckless, unstable, and gold-digging. But Damon didn't just sit in the audience. He stood beside her. His presence turned heads. His lawyer, sharp and well-spoken, dismantled every lie Daniel threw out. And when Damon requested to speak on the record, everyone leaned in. I've spent time with Sarah and her son, he said. And what I saw was love, stability, and sacrifice. That boy isn't in danger. He's thriving because of her. The judge didn't make a ruling that day. But as they left the courtroom, the media swarmed. Flashbulbs popped, questions flew, and Sarah clutched Liam as Damon shielded them both. She hadn't asked for fame, just peace. And now it felt like peace was slipping away the closer she got to Damon's world. Back at her apartment, Sarah stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Was she still the tired waitress who counted coins for milk? Or was she now the woman everyone gossiped about online? Damon offered to move her into a safer, more private place, but Sarah refused. I can't keep running, she said. She started pulling back. Ignored his calls. Canceled a dinner. When Damon finally showed up at her door, she didn't open it immediately. It's too much, she said through the door. I didn't ask for any of this attention. Damon's voice was low but clear. I didn't ask to fall for you, Sarah. But I did. And I'm not going anywhere. She opened the door slowly. He stepped inside, knelt down to greet Liam, then looked up at her. If you push me away now, I'll understand. But don't think for a second I'm giving up on you or your son. Her heart broke and mended at the same time. Maybe love wasn't about perfect timing, but about the courage to try, even when everything screamed no. Sarah decided to fight. Not just for Liam, but for herself. She went to court again, this time with her head high and Damon beside her. The judge finally gave a ruling, shared custody with full primary placement to Sarah, meaning Daniel would get limited, supervised visits. It wasn't perfect, but it was a win. That night, Sarah and Damon sat on her small couch. Liam was asleep, his little snores drifting through the room. Why me, Damon? she asked softly. You could have anyone. Damon took her hand, tracing the lines on her palm. Because when you fell asleep on my shoulder, it felt like the most honest moment of my life. You didn't try to impress me. You just needed rest. And I wanted to be the one to give you peace. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. No one had ever said something so simple and beautiful to her. Not even her own family. That night, they shared their first kiss, tender, slow, and full of promise. Not a promise of perfection, but of trying. Just when Sarah thought she had weathered the worst, another storm came, Damon's ex, Ava. Beautiful, poised, and venomous. Ava had once been his on-again, off-again socialite girlfriend, and she wasn't thrilled about being replaced by a nobody with a kid. She cornered Sarah at the diner one afternoon, smirking as she ordered a coffee she didn't intend to drink. Do you really think this is going to last? Ava said. You're a cute charity case, but Damon will get bored. He always does. Sarah said nothing. She dealt with worse. But Ava's words clung to her skin like smoke. That evening, Damon noticed her mood. She finally told him. He stood up immediately. You don't ever have to face that kind of cruelty alone again. The next day, Ava's photo disappeared from every major tabloid she used to flaunt. Damon didn't say how. He didn't need to. Sarah knew now, he would protect her peace like it was his own. To take her mind off things, Damon planned something special. No media. No interruptions. Just them. He took her and Liam to a private lake house he owned, hidden among tall trees and soft winds. Sarah couldn't believe the silence, how freeing it felt to hear only nature and laughter. They made pancakes in the morning and caught fireflies at night. Damon taught Liam how to skip rocks, and Sarah watched as the two of them bonded like they'd known each other for years. Her heart swelled and ached at the same time. Was it possible to love someone this deeply and still be afraid of losing it all? That night, Sarah stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. Damon joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. You don't have to keep holding your breath, Sarah, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. She leaned into him, closing her eyes. For once, she believed him. Just as peace returned, the internet exploded with a leaked video, Sarah and Damon kissing in her apartment hallway, secretly recorded by a neighbor. The backlash was brutal. People called her a gold digger, accused her of trapping a billionaire with her child, and even questioned Liam's paternity. Sarah sobbed in her room, turning off her phone and deleting every app she could. She hadn't asked for this. She'd only wanted a better life for her son. Damon came over and found her curled on the floor, shaking. He picked her up, held her like she was made of glass, and said softly, "We're going to take control of the story." The next day, Damon gave an exclusive interview. He spoke clearly, "I'm not a man who makes decisions lightly. I've never loved anyone the way I love Sarah. Anyone who wants to question that can look me in the eye and try." The media didn't calm down immediately, but Sarah felt the tide turning. Weeks passed. The noise died down. Sarah returned to work, now more confident, now more seen. Damon kept visiting the diner, often with Liam riding on his shoulders, giggling. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was real, and it was theirs. One evening, Sarah arrived home to find candles glowing and Liam holding a crayon-drawn sign that read, "Say yes." Confused, she stepped inside to find Damon kneeling, a small velvet box in his hand. "I don't want a life without you," he said. "Not one day, not 1 hour. Will you marry me? Sarah burst into tears. She thought of every night she went to sleep hungry so Liam could eat. Every shift she dragged herself through. Every whisper behind her back. And now, this. This moment. She nodded through the tears. Yes. 1,000,000 times, yes. After the engagement, Sarah felt like she was floating in a dream. The ring on her finger glistened like hope finally materialized. But while she smiled for the world, something inside her whispered doubts. Was she truly ready to step into Damon's extravagant life? Could she navigate the sharp edges of wealth and reputation without losing herself? These thoughts kept her up at night, even as Damon laid beside her, breathing softly, peacefully, unaware of the storm behind her quiet eyes. Preparations for the wedding began almost immediately. Damon wanted it small and private, just family and a few trusted friends, but word leaked and the media frenzy surged again. Suddenly, florists were turning down Sarah's calls, afraid of backlash from high society clients. Venues canceled without warning. She felt like an outsider in a world that smiled only to bite behind closed doors. Damon tried to shield her from it, but she insisted on facing it herself. If I'm going to be your wife, I need to be strong enough to walk through fire with you, she said. He looked at her then, with eyes full of pride and sadness. You already have, Sarah. You just don't realize it yet. Just weeks before the wedding, Sarah's mother, whom she hadn't spoken to in years, showed up at the diner. Her sudden appearance left Sarah stunned. Her mother, once cold and dismissive, now acted warm, almost too warm. I saw you on the news, she said, sipping coffee like no time had passed. Figured we should reconnect. Sarah didn't know what to feel. Part of her longed for a mother's embrace, for family to share in her happiness. But another part screamed caution. Her mother had abandoned her when she was pregnant, blamed her for ruining their reputation, and told her she'd never amount to anything. Now, she was smiling and asking about cake flavors. When she told Damon, he listened without interruption. Do what gives you peace, he said. Not what guilt tells you. In the end, Sarah decided not to invite her mother to the wedding. Some doors, once closed, didn't deserve reopening, especially when the person on the other side only knocked because there was a camera watching. Late one night, while wandering Damon's estate with Liam, Sarah found a room she hadn't entered before. The door wasn't locked, just forgotten. Inside were shelves of children's books, a small rocking chair, and a single photograph of a little boy with bright eyes and a solemn expression. When Damon found her in the room, his expression darkened. That was my brother's room, he said softly. He died when I was 10. It was the first time he'd mentioned family beyond formal words. He sat down and began telling her about the loss that shaped him, the way grief turned him into a workaholic, how silence became his closest friend. Sarah reached out, held his hand, and in that moment, something shifted. She had thought he was the strong one. But now she saw it, they had both survived pain, just in different costumes. And perhaps, that's why fate had seated her beside him that day on the plane, to remind him that even the richest hearts can still be lonely. The pressure of the wedding, the court battles with her ex, the judgmental glances, and Liam's sudden tantrums, all of it collapsed on Sarah one rainy afternoon. She screamed at the top of her lungs in her apartment, scaring even herself. Liam cried. She cried harder. And when Damon called, she didn't answer. He showed up anyway, soaked in rain, worried and breathless. She collapsed into his arms. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be that woman. Damon pulled back and held her face in his hands. "You're not that woman. You're my woman. And you're enough. Always." He held her until the tears slowed, until Liam crawled onto her lap with a quiet "Mama, okay?" It was messy. But real. And sometimes, that's more powerful than perfect. The night before the wedding, Sarah sat alone by the window in Damon's guest room. Her dress was hanging on the door, the bouquet already delivered. Everything was perfect. But fear clawed at her again, fear of disappointing him, fear of failing, fear of the fairy tale turning to dust once the clock struck midnight. Damon knocked gently and stepped inside. "Cold feet?" he asked with a small smile. Sarah didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "What if you wake up one day and realize this was a mistake?" He walked over, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you it wasn't." They sat there in silence, fingers laced. Not every fear needs fixing. Some just need someone willing to stay through them. The wedding was intimate, elegant, and breathtaking. Sarah walked down the aisle holding Liam's hand. Damon stood at the altar, eyes glistening, heart full. She looked radiant, not because of the dress or the pearls, but because, for once, she wasn't carrying the weight of survival alone. When they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Damon promised to love not just her, but Liam, like his own. Sarah promised to keep choosing him even on the hardest days. And when the words "I do" passed between them, it wasn't just a promise, it was a home being built, one brick of trust at a time. As they walked out to chairs and pedals, Liam threw his hands in the air, laughing. And Sarah, looking at her son and her new husband, whispered, "We made it." Their honeymoon wasn't in some fancy resort or exotic island. They chose a quiet cottage far from the world. No press, no phones, just them. Sarah laughed more in those few days than she had in years. Damon cooked, badly. She teased him. Liam danced in the living room in pajamas. They were a real family now. But even paradise has cracks. One night, Sarah woke to a nightmare. The old fear that everything good would vanish. Damon held her and said, "Let's stop thinking about what might go wrong. Let's live in what's going right." And that became their vow every morning. In that silence, in that simplicity, they learned that love isn't loud. It's quiet persistence. It's laughing at burnt toast. It's wiping away tears at 3 a.m. It's holding on, no matter what. Just as they returned home, a tabloid exploded with another headline, "Waitress to Wife, How Much Did She Really Take?" The article questioned their marriage, hinted that Sarah had manipulated Damon, and even shared photos of Liam with cruel captions. Sarah felt the old shame rise again. But this time, she didn't cry alone. Damon stood before cameras and said, "My wife owes no one an explanation. She didn't take anything from me, I gave her everything because she is everything." The backlash didn't stop immediately, but Sarah's confidence rose. For the first time, she held her head high, not because she married a billionaire, but because she loved without apology. One lazy afternoon, Damon and Liam were building blocks on the living room floor. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming, when she heard a small voice say something that made her freeze. "Daddy." Damon looked up, eyes wide. "What did you say?" Liam repeated it, then giggled and handed him a toy. Damon blinked away tears. Sarah walked in, hand over her mouth, trying not to sob. Damon whispered, "I've waited my whole life to hear someone say that to me." They both embraced Liam, and in that moment, the title billionaire meant nothing. He was just a man, finally, a father. One morning, Sarah woke up to an unusual silence. Damon was gone, his phone left behind. At first, she thought he'd stepped out for errands, but hours passed. Panic began to swirl in her chest. She called everyone she could think of, assistants, drivers, even house staff, but no one had seen him. Her mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. Just when she was about to call the police, the door creaked open and Damon stepped in, pale and shaken. "I had a dizzy spell while jogging," he muttered. "Didn't want to scare you." But Sarah knew something wasn't right. She demanded he see a doctor, and after some resistance, he agreed. The hospital tests revealed something that made Sarah's heart stop, an underlying heart condition Damon had never known he had. It wasn't fatal, but it required major lifestyle changes and stress management. Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand as he stared blankly at the wall. "Money couldn't even buy me a healthy heart," he whispered. "But I'm lucky. I already have what matters." Damon's condition shook them. It forced a deep conversation neither of them had been ready for. "What if I'm not around in 10 years? Damon asked one night, staring at the ceiling. Sarah turned to him, her voice firm. "Then we'll make this decade the best one of your life." They decided to slow down. Damon delegated more of his business empire and began spending entire afternoons playing with Liam, reading him bedtime stories, teaching him to ride a bike. Sarah took joy in watching them together, father and son, finally building what both had been denied for so long. But it also made Sarah more protective. When a journalist followed Liam home from the park one day, snapping photos, she erupted in rage. Damon hired round-the-clock security and publicly warned the media, "My family is not your story." And with that, the vultures slowly backed off, for a while. Just as life settled again, a letter arrived from Sarah's ex-husband's lawyer. He was demanding full custody of Liam, claiming Sarah's new lifestyle was unstable and harmful. The audacity left Sarah speechless. After disappearing for over 2 years, he now wanted her son? The court hearings were brutal. Her ex painted himself as reformed and painted her as someone corrupted by luxury. But Sarah stood tall. Damon, in a rare emotional moment, took the stand himself. "Liam is not just Sarah's son. He's my son too. And I won't let anyone rip him from the only family he's ever known." The judge saw through the lies. The verdict came down in Sarah's favor, and as she hugged Liam tightly in the courtroom, Damon kissed her forehead. "They tried to steal your peace again," he said, "but you fought for it. And won." On the 1-year anniversary of the day Sarah fell asleep on his shoulder, Damon handed her a letter. "I wrote this the night after we met," he said. "But I never gave it to you." Inside were words that made her chest tighten. He had written about how peaceful she looked as she slept, how the weight of the world seemed to melt from her face. How, for the first time in years, he hadn't felt alone. "You looked like someone who'd been through storms," the letter read, "but still found the strength to rest. I didn't know your name, but I knew I wanted to keep you safe." Sarah cried as she read it aloud. "I didn't know your name either," she whispered. "But I knew your shoulder felt like home." As Liam grew, so did their bond. He began calling Damon Dad more naturally. They had movie nights, pancake mornings, and silly traditions like dancing in the kitchen. Damon even built Liam a miniature office so he could work like Daddy. Sarah watched them with a full heart. Her world, once filled with exhaustion and fear, now glowed with love and safety. She'd fought so hard, cried so much, but now she laughed more than she ever imagined she could. One evening, as they lay together on the couch, Liam asleep on Damon's chest, Sarah looked up and said, "Do you think that flight was fate?" Damon chuckled. "No. I think it was destiny, with a bit of turbulence." Years later, a photographer secretly snapped a picture of them at a park, Sarah, Damon, and Liam curled together on a picnic blanket. The headline read, "From waitress to wife, the shoulder that changed her life." But the real story wasn't in the headline. It was in every morning Damon woke up early to help Liam with homework. It was in the times Sarah massaged his tired shoulders after long days. It was in every choice they made to love one another in private when no cameras were watching. The world saw a billionaire love story. But Sarah knew the truth. It was a tired woman who fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder and woke up to find not just love, but a new life, a family, and the proof that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings.